Hi there. In this video, we're going to be talking about different types of sampling methods that are used in surveys and how to recognize a bias in samples and surveys. So first, some terminology that you need to understand. When we use the word population, it means all of the members of a set. So if I was going to be doing a sample from the school, the population would be all of the members of the school. A sample would be just the people that I'm asking questions to, so it's a part of the population. Now, there are different types of how samples can be done. You can do a convenience sample, which is a selection of members of the population who are convenient and readily available. So if I was standing here teaching and my class was full of students, a convenience sample would be if I just said, okay, I want a sample for how the student body is feeling. So you guys, let me ask you this question to get your opinion on something. So that would be convenient because you're all right here. A self-selected sample is a selection of members who volunteer. So that might happen if I send out a link to the student body. I would get my sample back from the people who volunteered, or like if there is a poll in the newspaper, so people can volunteer to do that poll. Um, a systematic sample is a selection of the population in some way at regular intervals. So like if I stand at the door in the morning and I talk to every fifth person that comes in and asks them some type of survey question, or if I went through the phone book and called every 20th person in the list. And then next we have a random sample, and that would be when all members of the population are equally likely to be chosen. And so with that, that would be like if you had all the names in a hat and you drew them out, everybody would have an equal chance to be chosen. Or if you assigned every person, like for example, in our school, a number, and then I had a calculator or a computer generate a bunch of random numbers, and then the people that had that random number would be the ones who are asked. So that would be like a random sample. All right, now a bias is when a part of the population is overrepresented or underrepresented. So here's an example. The newspaper wants to find out what percent of the city population favors a property tax increase to raise money for local parks. What is the sampling method used for each situation, and does it have a bias? So, in the first example, a newspaper article on the tax increase invites readers to express their opinions on the newspaper's website. Well, it says, what kind of sample is it? That would be a self-selected, because people can decide if they want to be part of it. And does it have a bias? It's probably not real. Not everybody reads the actual newspaper website, so it may be bias in that some people wouldn't have the opportunity to give feedback on it. So there would be some sort of bias in that way. But that doesn't have a lot of bias in it. The next one would be a reporter interviews people leaving the city's largest park. Well, that would be convenience because you just go to the location and just sit there and talk to the people who are coming out. Well, that's probably going to have a bias because the people who use the park are people who like the park and would want to probably support the park. So they're more than likely going to say that they think that we should have a tax increase to raise money for the park. There's a better chance. So there is some bias in that one. The next one says a survey service calls every 50th listing from the local phone book. Well, that would be a systematic sampling. And that is probably less bias, although now our phone books are changing so much, we don't have the majority of the population in phone books anymore. So what I found is phone books tend to be used in homes that have been established longer, meaning probably older people live there, and they may have a stronger opinion of taxes than maybe a younger family that has maybe typically has cell phones. So that could bias it in some way by the people that you're asking if you're using a local phone book. Now, here's another example. To survey the eating habits of the community, employees of a local television station interview people visiting a food court in the mall. What sampling method are they using, and does the sample have a bias? Well, they're going to the mall and just there and talking to people, so that would be a convenient sample. And they want to know what people's opinions are of their food habits, or they want information about the food habits. And so does it have a bias? Well, yes, probably of some sort, because people who eat at a food court probably favor fast food. And so there would be some bias in that. Now, it's very important that we look at statistic models and we ask, how was this information gathered? How was it sampled? What was the age group that was sampled? What are the demographics? Are there certain areas of the country? Sometimes we have the internet used, and how many people are offline that didn't have an opportunity to be part of a study or a sample. All right, next we're going to be looking at data that comes from studies. And there are three different types of studies we're going to look at. First is an observational study, and that is when you measure or observe members of a sample in such a way that they're not affected by the study. So you're just observing a situation. Then we have a controlled experiment, and that is where you divide the sample into two groups, your control group and then your treated group. And then next would be the survey, and there you just ask every member of the sample a set of questions. So which type of study method is described in each situation, and should the statistics be used to make a general conclusion about the population? So here's the first example. Researchers randomly choose two groups of 10 volunteers over a period of 8 groups. One group eats ice cream before going to sleep and the other does not. Volunteers wear monitoring devices while sleeping, and researchers record dream activity. So they're doing a study to decide if your ice cream consumption affects your sleep and your dreams. So this would be a controlled study because they have divided them into groups. And it is probably it's probably an unreliable study because it was a very small set of people, only 10 people. So from 10 people, and really only 5 of them did eat ice cream before they went to bed, it would be very difficult to come up with a result that you would say was the general population, that represented the general population. So we would say that this is probably unreliable because it was too small of a study. All right, next one. Students in a science class record the height of bean plants as they grow. That's an observational. Okay, they're just recording their observations. Now, there are many things here that could be affecting any conclusions they make, such as the water type, or the water and the soil type and the sunlight. So this is an observational study, but probably a little bit unreliable too, possibly depending on all of the other factors that went into it. Next, student council members ask every 10th student in the lunch line if they like the cafeteria food, and this would be the survey method of a study. And it's not super reliable because the people that definitely don't like the lunch food probably aren't in line. They were probably brought their own lunch or they're leaving school for lunch. So the population that they're serving is going to tend to like the school food better. All right, let's look at the next question. A pharmaceutical company asked for volunteers to test a new drug to treat high blood pressure. Half the volunteers will be given the drug and half will be given a placebo, which means there's no medication in it. The researcher will monitor the blood pressure of each volunteer. Which type of study method is the researcher using? Should the sample statistics be used to make a general conclusion about the effectiveness of the drug in the larger population? And so they are going to be using a controlled experiment. All right, and should sample statistics be used to make a general conclusion about the effectiveness of the drug in the larger population? I think that definitely they could be used, but they would have to determine how many people were actually in the study and what were the general health, the health conditions of those people before they could use it to make conclusions about the larger population. Okay, next one. It says during the 2008 Olympic Games, a U.S. swimmer won more medals than any other swimmer in history. What sampling method could you use to find the percent of students in your school who recognize that swimmer from a photograph? What is an example of a survey question that is likely to yield information that has no bias? So here's what we need to understand here is the way that questions are asked can affect the reliability of research. And also even the orders that questions are asked can affect the reliability. So like if you said, who is the person that won the most games? If you said it like that, the 2008 Olympic Games, a U.S. swimmer, who is the person in this picture? Or do you recognize a person in this picture from the 2008 Olympic Games? People would have a better chance of remembering. But if you want to really see if they can just look at a picture of a person and know who it is, you would just hold up the picture and say, who is this person? There would be no biases there, no hints there. That's what would actually give you the information of who recognized the person. Next one says, what sampling method could you use to find the percent of residents, your neighborhood, who recognize the governor of your state by name? What is an example of a survey question that is likely to yield information that has no bias? So if you wanted to do a random sampling, you could go to every house in your neighborhood, or go to every other house on your neighborhood, or the houses that have even house numbers, that type of thing. And if you want it to be very random, you would hold up a picture and say, who is this person? And you might even want to find a picture of the governor where he's wearing maybe plain clothes, because if you put him in his suit with the little behind the flag, I mean, it's going to be a hint for the person too. So if you want to get legitimate information, you want to keep your question as unbiased as possible. All right, so the assignment that you're going to do today is page 728, 6 through 11, and 18 and 19. And the answer key is found in Schoology. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have questions.